Hey guys, Mr. Evans here. A couple people were having a tough time with graphing, so I want to show you a little bit about graphing and try and give you some instructions you can follow either at home or just on your own. If you have an assignment where you got to do some graphing, you can have a look at this, and we're going to make a line graph. I'm just using the data that we collected in the bubblegum lab. So if you didn't see the bubblegum lab, or maybe you're not sure what I'm talking about, it's a lab where all we were doing is just practicing collecting different types of quantitative and qualitative data. So you were chewing gum, and every few minutes we were testing to see what the mass change was. And anyway, so I've got that data here, and graphs are going to use our quantitative data. So I've got some quantitative data that I'm going to plot onto a graph. Just need to make sure I've got all the pieces. I got my graph paper, data, pencil, ruler. I got an eraser just in case, and I'm ready to go. So let's do it. Right here, I'm going to use the quantitative data that we took. So this is the bubblegum mass, or the change in bubblegum mass over time. So we chewed our gum for 8 minutes, and we saw the mass decrease. So we want to actually just show that on a graph so we can see what it looks like. And the graph sometimes can tell us a little bit more information. So kind of did this already, but let's just make sure that we go through each of the steps. We always want to have a title on our graph. And our title is going to be basically the same. We're going to use what are called the variables. And so in this case, what we're going to call this is the change in bubblegum mass over time. Okay? And obviously there's a little bit more to it than just that, but that's kind of the idea. So first thing I got to figure out is my x and y axis. So the x-axis is the horizontal one, and the y is the vertical one. I'm actually going to start with the y-axis, so that's going to help me figure out, that's going to be the tougher one. So I got to figure out the range of data. The range just means the top and the bottom. So the heaviest mass, or the greatest mass, was at 0 minutes, and that was 6.4 for this data. And the lightest was at, let's see, 2.7, which was at 8 minutes. So I want to go up above one solid increment above 6.4. So I'm going to start at 7. And I'm going to start actually by kind of choosing, I'm going to go right about, maybe about here. And I'm going to make a little mark here. And this mark is going to be my 7.0 mark. Again, that's the top end of my range. I'm going to skip one of these little squares and go down to the next one, and that's going to be my 6, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And so I can go ahead and mark those. So 6.0, 5.0. Okay, so there I have it. I want to make sure that I draw my line. So I'm going to get the line, and it's got to snap to that grid. Yeah? So don't draw it wherever the heck you feel like it. You want to start at 0 and go up to your top end. For me, that's 7. And draw my line. So there it is. Almost done for my y-axis, but I also need to label it. So I'm actually going to turn it sideways, and I'm going to put a label on here. So I need to know what this is, and so you have to say what it is and then what units I'm using. So in this case, this is the gum mass in grams. Now you don't have to capitalize grams, but I like to capitalize my units just so I can be clear on them. Okay. So I've done my y-axis. Now I've got to do my x-axis. So my y-axis was the gum mass. Well, there's the gum mass. And now I've got to do the time chewed. So I've got 0 to 8 is my range. And because this is the manipulated variable, I already know it just goes up to 8. I get to decide that. Not going to change anything. So I'm going to start here at the bottom of the y-axis, and I'm going to just start with 0. So 0 for the 0 minutes, and then I'm going to skip a square. So every 2 squares on my grid, I'm going to put a mark for each of the times from 0 to 8. Fill it in. And they're all regular, and that's important. Even though on my data, I did not collect data for 4 minutes or for 6 and 7 minutes. Even though I didn't collect that data, it's important that my x-axis shows regular spacing between each of the numbers, and in this case that's representing time, right? I can't warp time, so I got to keep it the same. And then I'm going to draw the line. I'm going to put my pencil down firmly on the line there at 8, and I'm going to draw a line that goes back to 0. There we go. There's my x-axis. Oh, except, of course, I forgot one thing. Did anybody catch it? I forgot to write my label here at the bottom. So what I'm going to write down here is time chewed, because I was chewing the gum, in, and what are the units? Oops. My pencil needs an eraser. In minutes. Those are my units. Okay, cool. So now I've got all the pieces set up. What I've got to do is start plotting my data. So I'm only going to put one set of data on here. I'm just going to do the change in the mass of the gum that I've got here in this data table. Now I can put more than that. If I wanted to put somebody else's data, I could do 2 lines or maybe even 3 or 4 or an average. But for our purposes, I'm just going to put 1 line on here. So let's look at the data again. When I'm plotting data, I've got to take into account both of these numbers. Now the easy number is going to be this one because it's going to be just on the line of the x-axis. So at 0 minutes is right there. All I'm going to do is I'm going to follow that. That's kind of my 0 minute line. And I have to go up to 6.4. So I go up to 6.4. Let's see, it's not on here, right? So I've got 6 and 7. This here is going to be 6.5, and 6.4 will be just underneath it. And I'm going to draw a little x just underneath 6.5. Now my 1 minute data is a little easier. That's 6.0. So I'm going to go from 1 minute at the bottom. I'm going to follow this 1 minute line all the way up to 6.0, and I can do a little x there as well. I'm going to do the same thing for each of my data points. So I'm going to do that kind of quickly here. And you'll do the same thing. You'll just mark a little x between each data point. So okay. Oops. So I've got my data on here. I have plotted each of the pieces, and what you'll notice is that I got these big gaps in time, right? Because I didn't do 4 minutes, I didn't do 6, and I didn't do 7. That's okay. And now I'm going to connect the lines. Now, there's a couple ways you can do it. We're going to stick with the simplest way, which is just to draw a straight line using our ruler through each of these data points. Sometimes you'll see scientists that'll do a curved line between these, and that can help them estimate what the mass is going to be if they were to estimate. Like, we didn't measure at 6 minutes, but we can kind of guess what that is based on the lines. Anyway, to connect these, I'm going to start at 0. So that was my first data point. I'm going to put the pencil down firmly on that, and using my ruler, I'm going to line it up so that I can draw a straight line between my first and second data point. I'm going to do the same thing for the next one. And then if you haven't figured it out already, I'm going to do the same thing all the way through. Awesome. There we go. That's it, you guys. I've got my graph now. All I have to do is to figure out how to interpret that and see what it tells me. All right. So we've got our graph. I've got all of my data plotted. I've got my line. And we're ready to go. So now that you have a graph, you can finish up your results section and move on to figuring out what sorts of conclusions can you make about the change of mass of gum or whatever it is that you are making a line graph for. So let me know if you got any questions, and I will see you in class, unless you're already there, in which case, hey, I'm right over there.